Today's MMA Company Fighter Spotlight is with Ryan Cafaro. Ryan is coming off of a decision victory at Art of War 19 on Saturday. That improved his record to, I believe, that will be 8-5 now. Ryan, is that correct?
Yes, sir, that it is.
All right, so 8-5 is professional, coming off of a win. You had a pretty long layoff between fights. So, how are we feeling this week after the fight?
I feel great. I'm banged up, and I couldn't be happier about it. I mean, like after the fight, I couldn't close my hand. It was so friggin' swollen. My left hand. I kept landing left hooks in the fight. Uh, Hassan had a big afro, so I couldn't. When he ducked his head down and started swinging, I couldn't see what the fuck I was hitting. So I would just swing as hard as I could and hoped I hit something. But I probably dinged his forehead a lot because, like I said, I could barely make a fist. But all the swelling's coming down. My this was actually my first fight ever throwing calf kicks, and they suck. I do not like calf kicks. I like the fact that they do damage quickly, but my shin is absolutely trashed. I don't think anything's broken, but it's just so swollen. Going up and down stairs is a pain in the ass. So I mean, it's like I was victorious and I was happy about it, but I mean, I've never been this banged up after a fight. It was definitely a hell of a fight, and I'm glad that I got to get a full 3 rounds in.
Yeah, and it was, I mean, I think everybody was on their feet at Art of War. I got to watch it through Bicking's stream because I wasn't able to be there. But you seem to be you know, you always are confident in your striking, right? But after 2 years, people say there's quote unquote ring rust or whatever that may be. But it didn't seem like you even skipped a beat from your last fight. Did you feel, all your timing was there? You feel kind of like jumping back on the bike, like you never really took that 2 year layoff?
Well, I mean, I do think ring rust can be a factor, and maybe it was in terms of like my lack of countering with combinations. I was throwing single shots, but they were landing effectively and so I think that my counters ultimately won me the fight, and some of my offense as well. And I think that maybe if I had continued fighting for the past 2 years, maybe I would have been a little more able to fire off rapid combinations as opposed to looking for like single punches because I was just so excited to try to like really get like a big highlight reel finish. So but one of the big things is I feel like everybody listens to Dominic Cruz when he talks about that ring rust is literally up here. And I wouldn't agree with that 100%. I do think that ring rust can be a factor, but I do think if you spar appropriately and you spar pretty intensely, you can get right back in there. Because I mean, you saw TJ Dillashaw took over a 2 year layoff, and he looked every bit of like he didn't miss a beat fighting Corey Sandhagen. And I really used Dominic Cruz and TJ Dillashaw, even though he's a piece of shit, as motivation for having such a long layoff, but such a good performance. So I just followed that mindset of like ring rust is a state of mind, and I'm choosing to ignore it and not to believe in it. And I feel like, maybe it worked well in my favor.
Yeah, I mean, it seemed to me like it worked, and part of it always is. I mean, part of fighting, a large part of fighting, is mental, right? So, even if you're sparring hard and you're doing the things that you need to do in the gym, it's always a little bit different making that walk, even though you've done it, a ton of times now in your career. What do you like, backstage when you have a fight coming up? Are you laid back, relaxed? Are you joking, just kind of like you are in the gym? Or are you all business and ready to go?
Yeah, honestly, it depends on fight to fight. But this time I was sitting in the back and just listening to John Mayer's new album. It's kind of I love that new album. It's so good. Um, so I mean, it's funny because like I'm in this position now where I've been an experienced pro for a long time, and it's maybe one of my I think it's my second time being the main event for a show. The other time I main evented against Scott Heckman for Maverick MMA, and it's just funny when you're sitting in the back and you're watching amateurs and they're sitting there like, oh god, like this is it, this is the big one, and I'm just sitting there relaxed and like listening to John Mayer's Sob Rock, and I'm like, oh okay, cool, like you do your thing, dude. um and I was definitely focused for this one, but I mean, man, having such a long layoff, and honestly I feel like I've underperformed so badly in my past couple fights. I think I underperformed against Scott Heckman. I think I underperformed against Boy McCarmo, even against Mike Lawrence when I got kicked in the head and won that fight. I think I underperformed there. And then when I fought Tim Dooling for Ring of Combat, I feel like that was probably one of the worst performances of my career. And so I feel like even though I have 5 losses on my record, I feel like I could easily be like 11-2 as opposed to 8-5. And I just wanted to, I had so many like inner demons constantly in the back, just saying, like my head was just going through this phase of like my brain was already preparing like an Instagram lost post. Like it was like, hey guys, sorry, I put in all this hard work and ring rust was up. And I was like, shut up, shut the fuck up, shut up, shut up, shut up, shut up, shut up. And I had to tune that out because I was just so, honestly, I wasn't even scared of like winning or losing. I was just scared of underperforming because I hate doing so well in the gym and then not performing when it counts. Because I've always taken pride in and been like, hey, I might not do that well in the gym, but when the spotlight is on, I fucking perform. And I was just so like in my own head about like, why have I not been performing lately? And so I was really glad that I was able to go out there and do not everything that I do in the gym, but definitely showed a lot of more of what I'm capable of.
And you said something there that I think a lot of people don't realize once a fighter gets a decent amount of experience is you're not necessarily concerned with the loss. If somebody goes out there, they perform better than you and they just beat you on that night, then they beat you on that night. But if you go out and you have a shit performance, right, then that I think hurts you mentally more, even if you get the win, than a loss with a good performance would feel. And that's something that fighters, I think, struggle with a lot is, like you said, you dominate somebody in the gym and then you go out and it just, something didn't click and that performance just wasn't there. So did you do anything differently in this fight to go out there under the lights and, have a good performance?
I did. I told myself throughout, like, I've never been like, when you see guys who are on the regional scene or even just in like the pro rank, they're like, oh, I'm the best in the world, blah, blah. And you're like, fucking relax, dude. Like, you're clearly like easy, take it easy, bub. Or like, guys that just post this like boisterous and braggadociousness and confidence about how good they are. And I always have been realistic about it, or I've been like, dude, you're like whatever on the regional circuit, fucking take it easy. But then this camp, I really was like, you know what? Let me try something new and let me positively reaffirm to myself how good I am. And I told myself after every spar, and I would tell myself after some hard training sessions, I would start saying out loud, I am the best in the world. I am the best in the world at 145 pounds. I am one of the best in the world. I just kept saying it. I am the best in the world. I am one of the best in the world. And I really feel like that helped me drown out a lot of the negativity and a lot of the doubt I would have in my head. Because if I would have this thought of like, oh, what if he hits me and I get knocked out? Or like, oh God, what if I start getting out wrestled and I just freeze or something? I would just be like, I am one of the best in the world. I am one of the best in the world. And I just kept saying it over and over until I really did believe it. And that night I was like, I am the best in the world at 145 pounds. I don't have to be the best in the world year round, but tonight I am the best in the world. And maybe I'm fucking not. I don't know. But the point is that it put me in the mindset of where I really didn't have doubt and I had a lot of self-belief. And I feel like my self-belief is what allowed me to do the things that I did in the cage that night.
And it's one of those things, right, where you are the best in the world in your mind in that cage that night. And it doesn't matter if they put Hassan in front of you or any other 145 pounder, you're going out there and you're going to be the best in the world on that night. And then the next day, the fight's over. So you don't have to reaffirm that every single day after that,
Right.
but leading up to it, nobody was beating you that night.
Right. Now I can breathe. Now I can relax and be like, all right, now I got some work to do because I'm clearly not the best 45. but for that night, I had to believe it 100%, and I believed it 100%. So,
and you do train with a lot of the best fighters in the world. You train with them, you coach them. You're a very busy person in the MMA community, right? You're traveling all over the East Coast. You're, flying to Fight Island. You're doing all these different things in the last 2 years. But I don't think a lot of people realize that while you're doing all of this coaching and while you're doing all of this training of other people, you're in the gym improving yourself as well every day. And you may not be posting about it like other people are, but that doesn't mean you're not doing it.
So one of the niches that I've carved for myself in the pandemic is that I've become like essentially a Swiss Army knife coach. Like I can do everything. I can hold pads for boxing. I can hold pads for Muay Thai. I can hold MMA style pads. I can wrestle. I can grapple. I can do, straight jujitsu. I can help cut weight. I can help keep you in shape. We can work out within the gym, lift weights, all that shit. So I can do all of it. And in order for me to stay sharp, I have to stay sharp with the athletes that I'm training. So a lot of the times, not only am I a coach, but I'm normally one of the head sparring partners because I'm also pretty good at imitating fighters. So, like for example, whenever Sajara has a fight coming up, like I'm normally one of her main sparring partners because I also have I've developed a really good ability to kind of pull my strength and my size out of the equation to make it a little more realistic, especially for smaller sparring partners. Um, but then some of the sparring partners I work with are literally the best in the world where I have to just be on or it's not even worth their while to spar me. Like two of my main sparring partners for this camp were Tiger Magomedov. Yeah, Magomedov from Bellator, who's 18-1. His only loss is to Petr Yan. He's the only person to beat Petr Yan. So that was one of my main sparring partners, and I had to learn to spar him from southpaw. So now I can fight southpaw. And then my other sparring partner was Zabit's brother, Hassan Magomedsharipov. So I'm on a regular basis, I'm sparring two of the most dangerous, most dominant Dagestan fighters. And in order for me to continue to get rounds with them, I have to show that I'm competitive. So in order for me to do that, I have to stay sharp. So I constantly am training and I'm constantly getting better, even though I am helping these guys by holding pads and coaching and stuff. But I don't have time to just do one. I have to be able to do both. And that's what makes my position so interesting in the sense that I am a full-time active coach, but I'm a full-time active fighter, and they're bouncing back and forth between and allowing me to do both effectively.
And the coaching is interesting to me. When I started coaching jujitsu, I started thinking about jujitsu in a totally different way because doing something is one thing, but then showing someone who has a different way of thinking about things and getting them to accomplish that same goal is a whole different way of thinking about anything from a sweep to a jab to a leg kick. How was that transition for you, mentally, of being able to then explain things 4 or 5 or 6 different ways? Did that help you as a fighter as well?
I would say so because they say if you can teach something, you can do it. And I have been an instructor. I may not have been a world-class UFC coach for long, but I have been an instructor for a very, very long time. I started coaching and teaching classes at the same time that I made my amateur debut in 2009. So I have over a decade of experience coaching and cornering. I've been cornering people since my amateur debut in 2009. So I've definitely racked up over 100 fights for sure in terms of cornering experience. And I mean, it definitely shows when I go on the big stage and I'm cornering on Fight Island by myself and stuff like that, and I'm giving concise, appropriate advice to a fighter. And I definitely think that being a good coach can help translate positively and negatively to yourself as a fighter. Positively in the sense that like you hold yourself to such a high standard because you coach everyone, so you want everything to be right. So when I do things myself, I have to make sure that it's something that I would be willing to say, hey, this is how you do it correctly, because I do it appropriately and I teach it appropriately. But on the other hand, I also feel like it can be negative in the sense that sometimes when you're your own coach, or sometimes when you have so much knowledge, it can be like too many options can cause inaction. Like sometimes, like Eddie Alvarez told me, he's like, yo, like dumb it down this fight. Like don't over try to do too many techniques. He was like, just focus on what you know and what works well. And I feel like I have such a wide arsenal of things that I can do in terms of punching, kicking, kneeing, elbowing. And then I stuck to about 4 or 5 techniques that I knew worked really well in this fight. I stuck to the left hook, I stuck to the switch kick, I stuck to the low kick, and I stuck to the left knee, and then an elbow here and there. But I worked with a small group of techniques that I knew were successful for me in the gym, and I applied them to the fight. And I didn't do, I was, practicing spinning this and spinning that, and I did no such thing in the fight because, and it paid off.
And as a fighter, is that one of those things where you want to be able to have it in your arsenal if the opportunity arises, but it's not something that you want to force, and you have to go between that mental that mental balance of you stuck to those four things, but you could have thrown a spin kick or a spinning back fist, but the opportunity just wasn't there, so you're not going to force one of those things.
Right. I definitely think that there were I've attempted to force things in previous fights, and it's cost me in fights. Like I felt like if I had stuck to a similar style game plan to what I did today when I had fought Scott Heckman, for example, I feel like I may have been more successful. But I became overzealous in that fight, throwing, flying knee this, spinning back fist that, and just, really aiming for like a one shot highlight reel knockout. Because at that point in my career, I was 6-2, and I was reading all these articles from, like my MMA news about how, the winner of this fight could easily get a shot on the Contender Series. I was that close to being in the UFC, and I really felt at the time I was UFC caliber. And that, it just showed that, a loss to such an experienced and tough veteran like Scott Heckman, that, I really wasn't ready for the big stage. And then unfortunately for me, the mentality sort of forced me to quicksand, where I just lost fight after fight after fight in fights that I really don't think I should have lost. Not in the sense that they were robberies, but more in the sense of my underperformance. So I definitely feel like it was a good. This fight in particular allowed me to really stay focused and get back to what I do best, which is win fights with smart fundamentals. I did some dumb shit though. I put my hands down, and my coaches were like, "Put your fucking hands up." So, but I put my hands down in the gym sometimes.
Mhm. Yeah, and you mentioned, getting to that big stage. In the Heckman fight, you might have been one fight away from that Contender Series or a short notice call up, something along those lines. Now it's a couple fights later. You've been around that big stage. You've been in the back. You've been around these 145ers that are, right around the same record that you have, or same number of fights. Wanted to talk to you about your plans for the future, right? Because you're coming off of a win, you're feeling very confident, but you're also building this coaching repertoire of something that you could just coach, 4, 5, 6 years down the road, full-time coach. So do you think about that? Like, do I want to fight and coach for X amount of years? Do I want to go strictly into fighting? Where's your head at in terms of like those two coming together, or is one more dominant than the other?
I'm sort of honestly, I'm inspired by the most by James Krause. I want to do it all. Like James Krause is in there coaching every single week, and then he's also fighting still. So I just feel like what would really separate me from the pack is to do something like that, where I'm able to coach at the highest level and also able to compete at the highest level simultaneously. I think that's a really, really cool thing. And I think it's something that lets me stand out amongst all the other fighters and all the other coaches. And I feel like it's hard for me to say no to one or the other, because both are extremely beneficial in my opinion, because I can't take too much of a break and get sloppy or get lazy as a fighter, because I have to be back in the gym helping, and I have to be back in the gym coaching. And then, vice versa, I if I'm done coaching, then I can't stay out of the gym long because I'm always preparing for a fight. It's funny because I kept telling myself in the back about, oh, I had such a good camp, I had this camp, and then I like kind of came to the conclusion, I was like, this wasn't a camp. I always trained like this. The difference was like I stopped eating like pasta and sugar for like 8 weeks, and aside from that, I didn't really change anything. I just continued doing the stuff I always do, maybe with a little more purpose and a little more mental clarity and focus. But I mean, you and I trained together in the pandemic a little bit. I mean, like you saw, I was always in shape and always ready to get after it, and was always training as if I had something coming up, even though I didn't. So like I said, I do this year round, and I mean it.
Yeah, I think that that is a that mentality I think separates a lot of, I don't even want to say casuals because they do compete and they do fight, but you've trained with them, I've trained with them, so many people who literally they're in the gym for camp. And then you might see them 1 or 2 days a week, but then when 8 weeks from a fight comes up, then that's when they show up and that's when they're in 5, 6, 7 days a week and doing 2 days and whatever that is. And then there's people like you, right, who you just train all year round. And I think that's a growing mentality of this is a full-time 365 sport. There is no on season, off season, right? It's just you train all the time and you have to be ready at all times.
Yeah, I mean, there's fights year round. There's fights. There's a fight. Art of War's doing one coming up on October 30th on Halloween. So I mean, there's just, and I mean, there's fights all over the world, and with the right connections, you could fight once a month for 12 months every year, um, assuming you never got hit and blah blah blah. But
If you're the
but
best fighter in the
definitely,
absolute world.
yeah. But I just kept saying to myself in the back, like, like you can't take an 8-week camp with me and expect to beat me. You need an 80-week camp, because I'm that's how long I've been training since my last fight, essentially. Like I haven't fought in over a year and a half at this point, because my last fight was I think November or October. I think November of 2019. So it's been a long time, and I haven't really stopped training since. I mean, like I lost that fight on like a Saturday, and I was taking gi jiu-jitsu on Monday.
Mhm.
And so yeah, I feel like my consistency and my persistence is what's going to allow me to ultimately get back to my hot streak winning ways, where I was beating guys that were 2-0, 3-0, and then 15-4, and where I was just on that streak of just beating tougher and tougher opposition, going after bigger and bigger fish. And I just think I'll just go back to doing that again. And then um, I think I have the right connections and the right level of excitement to how I fight, that I could easily get a call up to the UFC or a Contender Series. So I mean, Contender Series comes back in the fall. I'll be more than ready, and maybe I'll try to get one more fight and be prepared for if somebody pulls out.
All right, so you just answered the last question I had for you, which is I know you're super busy and I know you're coaching, I know you're fighting, I know you're training all the time. What's the next couple of months look like for you? Do you got a coaching schedule where you're going to be in people's corners? Are you just hanging around the East Coast and training with people and holding mitts, or what's it look like over the next couple of months?
So for once, I have nothing coming up. Sort of weird. I was like, all right, well, no one has a fight coming up. And it was funny too, because I had planned for this fight camp. I had planned it perfectly, where my last person I was going to corner was Sajara Eubanks, like 6 weeks before I fought. And I was like, all right, this is perfect. And then I have 6 weeks to focus on myself. I don't have to focus on anything, just me, 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 me. And then her fight got canceled and then pushed back 6 weeks to the week before my fight. So I was like, oh, shit. So then, and I've always had, people be like, hey, you can't go corner people. You can't go coach people. You have to focus on yourself in fight camp. And I was like, I know. But real quick, let me just focus. Let me just do this one real quick, because me and Sajara, we've got such a great fighter coach relationship, and she actually cornered me for this last fight, so it was great. A week before my fight, I flew out to Vegas and cornered her, and then she flew right back and cornered me. So it was really cool, and she went in her entire camp. I'm cornering her during her rounds, and then as soon as she's done, I'm gearing up, and then she's like taking a breather, and then like, oh shit, and then she's cornering me. So I can't thank Sajara Eubanks enough for helping me out, and reciprocating and returning the favor in terms of the coaching, because having somebody there who watches all my spars day in and day out really makes a world of difference when you're coaching and when you're fighting.
Yeah, it's always nice to have that person and to also keep it real with you, right? Not just to say every day, Ryan, oh, you did so great today, but actually say, like, Ryan, this was shit, that was shit, this is what we need to work on, right? If you can find that person,
Yeah.
then I think that's also very important. That coach relationship where they don't just always say everything's great, right? That also
Yeah,
helps.
it was funny. In the middle of the pandemic, I rolled with Sarge when we were in Vegas at the Performance Institute getting ready for a fight. for one of her fights, like on fight week or something. And then she was watching me grapple, and she was like, you're not good at jujitsu. You're not doing anything." But I was like, "Me?" I was like, "I thought." She's like, "No, you're just spazzing." She's like, "You're scrambling and you're spazzing. You're not actually doing any jujitsu. You need to work on your actual jujitsu." And I was like, "Oh shit." I was like, "Well, I mean, I'm not going to argue with a 7-time jiu-jitsu world champion." So then I started actually really training my jiu-jitsu, and really immersed myself under Ricardo Almeida's tutelage, because she trains there as well. So, and then all of a sudden, we're grappling, and then I hit her with a bolo, and she's like, "Look at you!" She's like, "Doing jiu-jitsu." I was like, "All right, right, I'm doing some jiu-jitsu." So, it's a shame I didn't get to show it in this fight, because Asan was so fucking hard to take down. I couldn't get him to the ground, but I improved my jiu-jitsu in leaps and bounds, working with Ricardo Almeida, Sajara Eubanks, and then Will Wolk, who are some of the top level grapplers I've worked with. And then Mark Gray for my wrestling, one of the most accomplished high school, college wrestlers of all time. So I definitely have the right team around me to really improve my skill set all around. And I feel like for the first time in a long time, I have the right team and the right environment around me where I can really let loose my full arsenal of techniques. And next fight's only going to be even better.
Awesome, man. I'm looking forward to it. Hopefully, you get a little chance to relax here in the next couple of weeks because you have nothing that's scheduled. But I'm sure something could pop up, and then you'll be on a plane at
Yeah,
any given time.
definitely. Something will pop up. It always does. It's like the movies where I'm like, it's quiet, too quiet. So
Hopefully, you get a little bit of time to relax. Pleasure talking with you today. Good luck, in everything that you're doing. Congrats on the win, and looking forward to seeing the cage again soon.
absolutely. And then thank you for having me. And if you guys want to buy a cool T-shirt, you should go to my MMA Tico and get one of my cool walkout shirts.
Awesome. Thanks for the plug. I appreciate it.
All right, have a good one, guys.
All right.
Thank you.
See ya.